We have put an assembly together, and now we might want to add a few more parts. So let's talk about editing these parts in ways that we've never done before in this series. So we have the chair, and the way that we've mated this, of course, is we have this back that is floating in midair, and as you can tell, we need a bracket that will hold this together. So let's make a bracket in this video, but let's do something completely different and make the bracket in what's known as in-context editing. First, I'll start with a new part. And in this environment, I'm going to select my ZY plane, or my YZ plane, and create a sketch on it. And what I'll do is, in fact, I'll put the origin at the very top, do a vertical line, a horizontal, and then an angular line. I'll set this angular line to have a 135-degree angle. And I'll have very little detail beyond that. What I'll do is deactivate the sketch. I'll use a thin extrude, and I'll make sure that the thickness is indeed on the outside, as we have here, and I'll make this 0.25 thick. I'll also go into my sketch and lengthen this out a little bit and deactivate. I'll put a hole pattern here. And in fact, since I'm doing a thin extrude, I notice that my origin is in the corner, so let's do mid-plane, and I'll simply go a distance of 4. Now, I'll sketch on this face. Again, 4 holes. They're going to be 2 apart. 1, I'll get an equal and make sure that all of these holes are equal. We'll go with a vertical and make sure that these holes are vertical to each other. And then I can add a symmetry. Of course, I can select my y-axis from the tree here. And symmetric. We'll give each of these a diameter. I'm going to say 0.51. And without fully constraining, I'm going to extrude. And we'll say OK. All right, so I have the basis of this. After we save, we'll go back to the main assembly. So let's say this is where we want our chair back. What I'm going to do is highlight this line. We're going to add a constraint and make sure that this line is right on this plane. And we'll apply that. That's how we know that our chair back is now at least centered on the plane. So no matter how I manipulate this, it's always going to remain centered. So next, again, I'll take one view here. So we'll go right there and say maybe this is the ideal position for our seat back. I'm going to anchor that. Now as I fix this seat, you'll see that some things in the tree don't agree with me anymore. And that's because this is fixed, the coincident that I just applied is over-constraining the assembly because it's a fixed part, so we can't tell it that this line should be on a plane. So I'm going to now delete that, and I can delete this angle as well. And then all of our constraints work out again because now we're not over defining anything. Let's add in the bracket. So we're going to say Insert Design. We'll add in the bracket. And you'll notice we didn't define the bracket very well, and there are some problems. But that's okay because that's what these parts are here for. That's what this video is about, is working out some of these problems. So I will align these holes by their centers. I'll put this bracket in the right place. Right now, arguably this bracket is fully defined, even though we're just on a fixed part. And when we have a part that runs between other parts and really needs to be defined in the context of the assembly, like this bracket, we need it to fit right, we can do in-context editing with assemblies. And this is a new approach that we have not covered yet. So what I'm going to do is go to my bracket, or I can right click on my bracket, either way, and I can say edit here. And now I'm in the part environment instead of the assembly environment. All the parts have gone transparent except for the part that I'm editing, which is the bracket, and I have the full history tree of my bracket. So I can start to edit things in the way that I would like. For example, now that I'm in the context of my assembly, I'm able to raise these holes up to something that's meaningful. So I can reset my view. I can grab this and this and start to import parts, and I can say, oh look, I'm about 1/2 inch too high, and so I want to lower that or raise my holes at least 1/2 inch. I'll add a dimension to my hole centers to this top edge and say 0.55. And now if I deactivate the sketch and I go back to my assembly, so I see my top level assembly here, and I click edit part or assembly, then the bracket updates, and now it fits pretty nicely in that space. Let me go back to edit my bracket. We're going to say edit here. Now we're back in the part environment, and I'm going to select this sketch and say edit, and now I can clearly see how my parts are fitting in with the other parts in the assembly. Of course, we want a bracket that will plug in with these holes. But it goes even further than that, because now I can use the parts of the assembly to help define my sketch. I can say coincident here, and I can make sure that this line is coincident, just like that. And I can also say that I want the end of my line to be coincident onto that point. So now if I deactivate my sketch, the bracket fits perfectly. And if I were to update something in my assembly, this part can update to make the fit correct. For example, I'll go to my seat. Well, first I'll go back into my assembly environment. Now I'll go to my seat, and I'll not anchor the part, and I'll move the seat's position a little bit. I'll regenerate, and as you can see, we've already updated the bracket. So this bracket updates its size depending on how I define my seat. So this is a very useful tool. I will hit Control Z a few times to get my seat exactly how it was before. I think that's what we were doing. And I'll re-anchor my seat exactly where I want it. We'll regenerate the part. I'll go back to my bracket here because my tree was in a rollback state. So we'll simply say generate to last feature and then go back to edit my assembly. And there we have the updated part. So we're able to edit parts in the context of the assembly, and if we change the assembly, we can have parts that automatically update to what we need. This can be a very useful feature in being able to easily define parts, and it's part of a build approach known as a bottom-up design approach instead of a top-down design approach, where we can have our parts interact with each other and build as we go. Something else that we would like to do before we close up is we need some holes here and maybe change the end face of this bracket just a bit. So let's work on the first thing. I'll highlight this face, so I'll say edit here, and we'll want to add our own hole. So I click on hole, and it recognizes my highlighted face as the face I'd like to put a hole on. I do like having a diameter of 0.51, and we'll say that our hole will extend through all. And I can tentatively place some holes in here. Now I can choose my concentric, and I can say, this is the hole that I wish to align with. Look how easy that is to line up your holes with the kind of geometry that already exists. That's so easy. And I can say OK to that. And finally, perhaps I want this to be flush with this face. So I can add a draft to this face, and what I'll do is choose draft, and then I want to select my neutral plane, and so I'll right click, and you'll notice that I can't actually choose the face to act as my neutral plane because I've got this transparent part in the way. But I can right click and choose advanced selector, and I can choose that face through the advanced selector. Next, I'll go to my angle. I'll go with 45 degrees and we'll see how that goes. And I'll change that draft inward. And now our bracket ends flush. So you can always do something like an extruded cut or whatnot, but I think a draft really has a simple elegance about changing the position of faces like that. And that is our intermediate bracket that will update if we update our assembly, and that is made in context. And that is in context editing. Hope you enjoyed. Join us in the next one where we're going to cover even more interesting things we can do in assemblies.